I do not like the idea of gotcha journalism. I think it is incredibly unhelpful. I think it's at the verge of dangerous. Whenever I read a piece in any of the legacy media that like sort of is a hit piece against someone, I cringe. I think of that person, opening up themselves to a reporter, and then being, presented in a way that perhaps they certainly didn't intend.
Yeah.
I think that is, I cringe, and I actually feel for the journalist who's stuck doing that, because I think that it just takes you down a real path of mistrust and suspicion. Anyways, I'm digressing. I tell my sources right up front what I'm doing. I told every single one of them. I am writing this book called Nuclear War, a Scenario. And I also asked them, is this fear-mongering? Because that was the question in my own mind that led a lot of the reporting. Shawn, what happens in this book is like everybody dies, and they die in the most horrific ways. I described to you in appalling detail what happens to humans, in a nuclear flash. I wanted people to know how horrific this concept is. And I told my sources that. And they were forthcoming with me, which says so much about nuclear weapons.
Interesting. Where did the interest in this come from? Are you worried about a nuclear war?
I am now. All of my books touch upon nuclear weapons because they all cover American history since World War II. And in every one of my books, so imagine 100+ sources for each book, how many of those people told me with deep pride, Annie, I did what I did to prevent nuclear World War III, right? So a lot of our really dark, dirty even the CIA's most dastardly sort of dark-hearted operations, you could say, in the 50s and 60s, people I interviewed who worked on those, or the very non-kinetic operations like in Area 51, which deals with reconnaissance missions, spying on the Soviet Union to try and find out what's really going on there instead of speculating. All of these people, a majority of them said to me, I did what I did to prevent nuclear World War III. And so in the previous administration, former President Trump, with the rhetoric about, fire and fury against the North Korean leader, I found that like shocking and rather unpresidential, right? Because there had been a precedent not to threaten people with nuclear weapons. It's dangerous. It really is. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. I, like many people, began to wonder, what if deterrence failed? Deterrence, just another synonym for prevention. What if it fails? Because all of nuclear warfighting, deterrence is predicated on this psychological phenomena. You who are so interested in the mind, right? It is a psychological phenomena. Deterrence will hold. Deterrence will hold. Deterrence will hold. And then you have a quote from a deputy director at Stratcom saying, if deterrence fails, it all unravels. That unraveling is this book.
Well, it must be a very realistic scenario if you're speaking, how do I say this, you're speaking in Brussels and there happen to be members of the EU Parliament listening. So let's go over the scenario.
Okay.
What do you think would trigger this?
A nuclear war could be triggered by any nuclear launch at the United States, period, right? So there are now 9 nuclear-armed nations. In my scenario, I chose a rogue launch from a ballistic missile, an intercontinental ballistic missile. Just like it sounds, it can travel from one continent to the other. That's an ICBM. In 30 minutes. Launch to target. 30 minutes.
That's the farthest target.
30 minutes. 33 minutes is actually from Pyongyang. 26 minutes and 40 seconds from Moscow to the East Coast. This is specificity. It doesn't change. All the new weapon systems, that doesn't change. That is what it was when they were invented. This is just basic physics. It goes, up and over the earth and down. Okay? And so then once you know that, wait, that's all it takes? This is not a 9/11 scenario where, someone whispers in the president's ears, "Sir, the planes have hit the buildings." It's not that. If you're me reporting this, suddenly you learn that the United States has not only spent trillions of dollars creating this vast arsenal of nuclear weapons, but defense systems to survey other nations. So we have a system of satellites in space, in geosync, 1/10 of the way to the moon, a satellite the size of a school bus, parked over North Korea, watching. So when launch happens, we see it in under 1 second. That's why my scenario goes by seconds and minutes. It's 72 minutes, this book.
Wow.
3 acts, 72 minutes, 24 minutes, 24 minutes, 24 minutes. Then you got the setup at the beginning and nuclear winter at the end.
Interesting. Real quick so here's what I'd like to do is dive into the scenario and then talk about some of the defenses that we have. Talk about what maybe your sources weren't able to tell you. I'd like to go maybe a little more into the scenario. But real quick, who are the 9 nations?
U.S., Russia, China, UK, France, Pakistan, India, Israel, North Korea.
Iran's not on there yet.
Iran is not on there yet.
Right on. Good for us. But out of those nations, who would you be the most concerned about? Give me your top 3.
North Korea.
North Korea.
And that's how I begin the scenario. It's a launch from North Korea. One of the most interesting people I interviewed for this book, okay, this on the cover here is a thermonuclear bomb called Ivy Mike.